Morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to the third Ancillary Services Focus Group Stakeholder Call. My name is Yelena Kopolov-Elford, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs. I'm joined by Isabella Mahine, Associate Account Manager and Stakeholder Engagement, Kelsey Ajak, Manager at Model and Contract Implementation, and David Acevedo, Lead Energy Data Acquisition Specialist. And then we'll also have Andrew Ulmer joining us as our Assistant General Counsel. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, this presentation is available on the KaiSO.com calendar from the calendar event for this meeting. And we also posted our responses to the last set of comments to the May 5th meeting. And you can navigate to the calendar event there. And then I think it's also available on the miscellaneous page under the May 5th meeting. So you can access that either way. So here's a couple housekeeping reminders before we get started. The call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. The meeting is structured to stimulate dialogue and engage different perspectives, but please keep your comments professional and respectful as always. And please try and be brief and refrain from repeating what's already been said so we can manage our time efficiently this morning. So raise your hand, make sure you open the participant and chat panels on the bottom right first, and then you will see the raised hand icon at the bottom of the participant panel. It's hidden in this version of WebEx a little bit. If you dialed in outside of WebEx, which I'm not sure we had anybody do that, you can press *3 to get yourself into the question queue. And please remember to state your name and affiliation before making your comment or asking your question. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, you can send a chat to the event producer. They show here as Ancillary Events, and today's event producer is Ahmed. And you can also send your questions in the chat to all panelists, or you can send it to me and I can read that out loud and have you be in the question queue as well. So here's our agenda for today. From here, I'm going to hand it over to Isabella to cover the goals for today, to review the stakeholder feedback from our last May 5th focus group. And then Isabella and Kelsey will go over the alternative proposal, and then we'll have an open discussion before closing this out. Isabella, it's going to be over to you.
All right, thanks, Yelena. If we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so just as a refresher of the background of the focus group format and the goals of today's session. So this focus group structure is meant to embrace flexibility to allow both organic and robust conversation on a specific topic. So the topic for this focus group being ancillary services, with the goal of driving towards a solution collaboratively with you all. So to kick off the meeting, I'm briefly going to go through the background and issue identification. We've done this through the past focus groups for this topic, but it'll just keep kind of the problem that we're trying to solve at the forefront of everyone's minds as we walk through the alternative proposal today. And then we'll spend some time reviewing stakeholder feedback themes from the May 5th focus group, which was our last focus group session. I will note that we have posted responses to all the comments that we received on that session out on the website, and we've included a link to that document on this slide today. So that is available for you all to review if you haven't already. And then after that, we'll discuss the alternative proposal to address the testing requirements for the AS certified fleet. So I'll provide a high-level overview of the alternative proposal, and then Kelsey will dive into some of the details surrounding that proposal. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so just as a refresher on the background and issue identification for this focus group, under Tariff Section 8.10, the ISO shall periodically conduct unannounced or announced tests of resources providing ancillary services, and the frequency of that testing should be within such timeframes that are reasonable under all the circumstances. So the problem statement that we had drafted previously is posted below. I will note that we've made one small change to the problem statement. Down in the last sentence, it says, this has led to a need to evaluate additional ways to validate that AS resources can appropriately respond to and provide their certified AS amounts. I think previously we had noted that it had led to a need to evaluate alternative ways. And so this clarification is really intended just to reiterate that this proposal would not supplant our current testing efforts, but rather be an additional layer to those testing efforts that we currently have in place today. So if we go to the next slide. So some feedback themes from our last focus group. We received several sets of comments and did our best to summarize all those common themes here on this slide. But again, a more detailed matrix with our responses is available out on the ISO website, which is linked here on this slide. So one of the common themes that we received feedback was that the added value of signing an attestation was unclear and that the risks may outweigh the benefits. And we also received feedback that proposed changes should be made through a formal stakeholder or BPM process instead of through a focus group or updates to an operating procedure. Also that additional training on current resource performance and AS expectations may be more beneficial or preferred over requiring attestations, and that resource performance testing should be conducted by the ISO to ensure reliability and not shifted to the SCs and resource owners. So again, just want to reiterate that the ISO still intends to conduct its testing efforts as they do today, and this effort would be an additional layer. There were also some concerns about excessive costs for retesting, and then there was overall a request for more clarity on the repercussions for noncompliance or failure to submit the attestation. So any questions on any of the information we've covered so far? Our next slide will dive into our alternative proposal that's been informed by all the stakeholder feedback. And then once we've gone through the details of that, we can open it up for more discussion. Okay. So the alternative proposal here, we have decided to shift away from the attestation proposal. A lot of this decision was informed by the feedback we received. So first, the ISO will continue conducting our AS testing and performance audits under tariff sections 8.9 and 8.10. But instead of the attestation, we are considering amending the compliance monitoring and the market operations BPMs through our proposed revision request process. And these amendments or revisions would expand on the scope of the ISO's AS testing program. And then also the ISO would update operating procedure 5370 just to make sure that the changes to the BPM and the operating procedures were aligned. So the goals of this would, one, be to increase transparency on the frequency and performance of AS testing, and then also clarify the ISO's expectations for AS providers that are outlined in tariff section 8.9. So within those amendments to the BPM, we would also indicate that the ISO may initiate a data request as necessary to verify how the resource owner is checking, monitoring, testing their system, and related equipment that is required in tariff section 8.9. And the ISO may do this if, one, the ISO is unable to test the resource within a specific time frame. So for example, if the resource hasn't been tested or audited within the past 3 years or so, they may receive a data request. And then also we may issue a data request if there are concerns with a resource's ability to perform or provide AS and is unable to verify through the means listed in both the market operations and compliance monitoring BPMs. So again, this is a high-level overview of the alternative proposal we're considering. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Kelsey Ajax to walk through some of the details and cover some of the proposed language that we're considering for the BPM and operating procedure revisions.
Thank you, Isabella. I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so some of the feedback we got from you all was kind of just wanting more specifics about kind of the timing and some of the things that we're doing for considering testing. So for our RTCD performance audit, so these are ongoing. This is currently how we manage our various testing and compliance monitoring. And we'll continue to do going forward. So first off, the RTCD performance audits. So anytime there is a real-time contingency dispatch, we do audit the performance during those events and, issue notices as necessary following the events. We also do our monthly regulation audits, and the way your resource might qualify for that is if they have a minimum of 5 qualifying intervals in the month being audited, and that's one of the items that we saw could be clarified better in the operating procedure of kind of like what that criteria is for how we select those qualifying intervals. And then the last one, the unannounced AS compliance test that we do is normally, so the way we do it is we have a list, and those resources that make the list are ones that were either recently certified or they completed a recertification test. So we can do like a little bit of a test after an unplanned test, so that to ensure that the resource can perform and respond unprepared. Or if there was a failure in one of the performance audited mentioned above, or one of the performance verifications. And then the last reason that it may make the list is due to a lack of a valid passing performance audit or performance verification within 2 years. So for whatever reason, maybe there weren't awards, maybe the times that the resource was awarded, they had AGC or whatever that might be, then that would put the resource on the list of one of the resources that we may do an unannounced AS compliance test. Next slide. So to just further clarify and be transparent of what we're looking to identify as potential resources that we'd want to do a data request for, it would be if at the end of 3 years, CAISA is unable to test using the methodologies listed on the previous slide, then we'd evaluate the need for a data request. We may review the current operational performance, whether it's just through performance data or even the PSPR method that we do. We may look at outages. There may be other factors that we look at to decide if the data request is needed. And the data request is really going to be to verify how the resource owner is checking, monitoring, and or testing the system and related equipment as per tariff section 8.9. And, at any time, not even have to be tied to a data request, any resource can request a recertification test as a form to verify the capabilities. That's always an option. And so we just want to have a better understanding, if we haven't been able to see it, with our own eyes, the performance, that there's some monitoring and checking going on, and we want to get the details around that. And I think that is all I have. So any questions on that?
There are no hands currently in the queue, and no questions in the chat. Okay.
Well, if there are no questions or comments at this time, we will have an open comment period following this call where you can submit your feedback there. But with that, maybe Yelena will pass it to you for next steps.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a hand from Rhett. Rhett, go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize we were going to next step so fast. So we had a couple of things we wanted to chat about, if this is the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first I'll say I appreciate you guys moving this to the BPM process. I suppose as we start to move into that mechanism, we'll have some more detailed comments and insight and comments there. But I did have a couple of just maybe foundational questions as we on what we have here, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So is that okay? So as I read 8.10, the onus of testing is on the ISO to do it periodically, and the method by which the ISO is allowed to test is defined in the tariff further in 8.10. And I noticed that in 8.10 it doesn't talk anything about an attestation or a data request. So I just wonder if you could just maybe foundationally explain how, right, since you can't test with a, since an attestation or a data request doesn't count as a test and not allowed under the tariff, I'm just kind of wondering how we're here at this point.
Yeah. Kelsey, can you speak to that a bit?
So sorry, Rhett, so you're thinking that CAISO doesn't have the authority to do a data request to meet the requirements listed within the tariff?
That's right. That's what I'm considering, right? Because the ISO, is required to test, and there's only certain ways in which you can test. And I know you're trying to meet, your obligation of testing all resources. I know it's difficult to test all resources, so you want to use this data request to kind of fill in the gap. But does the tariff actually, in your opinion, or like, how do you guys view it? How do you view it that the tariff allows you to fill in the gap of a test in this manner, given that the tariff doesn't allow for a data request to be a valid test?
So my understanding is that the tariff does give us the jurisdiction to do a data request. I believe it's section 8.4, but I would have to pull it up to confirm that. And that, and we completely agree to some extent that it's not a test. Ideally, it would be a test, and the method of doing a data request is one form of having, an additional layer of verification and comfort that this is being met. And, and if we feel like what we find from that requires a recertification test or some kind of a ISO test, we can request, that is done. But it would have reason of cause, I should say, that the requirements within the tariff weren't being met.
We do also have Andrew Ulmer, who has his hand raised. Andrew, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, hi. Hopefully you can hear me. I apologize for the ambient noise. This is Andrew Ulmer with the ISO's legal team. I just wanted to augment what Kelsey said. She correctly, I think, cited the tariff section number, which doesn't so much talk about a data request, but gives the ISO a overarching right to inspect resources that are providing AS to satisfy itself that they're meeting the technical requirements to do so. And that's an ongoing provision in terms of the ISO's right to make that inspection. The data request would just be, probably the procedure for doing so, and I think our view, the most non-intrusive way possible.
Yeah, no, we don't doubt that the ISO has to ask for data requests, from time to time for certain things. But I guess the question is more along the lines of, since the data request is not a test, how does the data request help you fulfill your obligation to test all resources?
Yeah, I think that the obligation is really to test resources within timeframes that are reasonable. Kelsey made this point. We don't see the data request as a substitute for a performance audit or a compliance test, and we don't intend to, reduce the amount of compliance tests or performance audits we're performing of resources carrying ancillary service awards or self-provisions. It's just another information source, that's all.
So So as I read your problem statement, then this doesn't help it doesn't help solve the problem then. Right? The problem statement is the ISO faces challenges ensuring testing of 100% of its resources under such timeframes which are reasonable. Right? So we're not solving that problem by doing a data request, right? Since it's not a test.
Yeah, I think it's giving us a little bit more information is all.
And assurance, yeah.
Yeah, and Rhett, if we look at the other half of that problem statement, you know, it's leading to us needing an additional way to validate the AS resources can appropriate respond. And so that data request would provide us with that information that would help us validate that the AS resources are able to respond. Which again, doesn't replace the testing efforts we currently have today.
I get that. Okay, I think I understand where you guys are coming from. I'm sure I'll have more comments on it later. So the other thing has to do with, it almost sounds like we've just changed the term, right? Instead of requiring folks to do an attestation, now we are requiring them to do a data request. Could you talk about what the substantial differences are between those two items?
Well, largely we're specifying, you know, the time frame in which, in trying to be more specific in which we would do so. And then, you know, I see it as more of, I don't want to say it's an informal request because it is a formal request, but it would be more of a conversational and a discussion topic to get more information on the testing, monitoring, verification of the processes. So I guess we see it more as a conversational request rather than just a submittal of a document.
So do you have a template in mind or a set of questions that you may be asking, right? For the attestation, you had like a 2-page document of all the things you thought, you know, folks would have to say that they can or can't do. Do you have something similar for what the data request would look like?
We don't have that drafted currently. I mean, sorry, did I cut somebody off?
No, Kelsey, this is Andrew. You didn't cut me off. I mean, that's the truth, right? We haven't documented or drafted anything. It's definitely something we would solicit comments on, you know, in the BPM process or this process as well. If you have views, I mean, I think our initial thinking is it would be something as simple as, you know, please describe, you know, your processes, the ancillary service providers' processes, and, you know, provide us with a copy of any operating procedure you have. That's probably it. But again, we haven't really discussed it in depth or drafted anything. But so again, welcome your comments there.
So that suggested. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I'll stop.
Sorry, Rhett, go ahead. No, go ahead. Let's get through this, and then we'll go to a hand from Tiffany after that.
Okay, I was just going to comment on what Andrew just said, that it suggests then that what a check and a monitor and a test looks like, right? Those are all can be very wide, can be very narrow. Those definitions probably would come from some type of agreement about what that may or may look like, and it could be different resource by resource.
Yeah, and I think we understand that, and that's why it is left open, you know, depending on what is appropriate for that resource specifically and would be evaluated, you know, as the submission is taken in and discussed.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next hand from Tiffany Bloom.
Hello, this is Tiffany Bloom at PG&E. First, I'd like to say thank you for listening to some of the comments and providing some alternative suggestions on the AS testing front. Regarding the current proposed language that's up on the screen right now, the second bullet point states that at any time the SC may request a recertification test to verify capabilities. I just wanted clarification. If in that 3-year point, CAISO sends a data request, does the SC have the ability to test in lieu of submitting data, or is the data, would the data still need to be submitted in addition to a recertification test?
I think with the proposal, a recertification test would be an acceptable form of a check, a monitor, or test of the system to make sure that it could meet the requirements.
Great, thank you.
And this is Andrew again. I mean, we definitely solicited your comments on that. I think PG made an interesting suggestion, which was that maybe in advance of asking for an attestation, which we're no longer proposing, we should invite a resource that hasn't gone through a performance audit or a compliance test in a long time to schedule one, a recertification test. The incentive is to be aligned or gone without its test for a long time to have it self-tested to avoid an otherwise potentially lengthy clawback period for either ancillary service payments or ancillary service credits to their AS obligations. So I thought that was a good suggestion.
Great, thanks for, again, looking at all the comments and making these revised suggestions. I don't have any more questions.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm not seeing any other hands in queue. You can still raise your hand as we go through this as well. Oh, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one more. Thanks. It has to do with how you're seeing the data request process play out. Do you think this would be part of the rules of conduct process? In other words, you've got X amount of days to respond. If you don't, we'll start penalizing you.
I don't foresee it being a part of the formal rules of conduct process. But we would, we would expect a response, and if we didn't get one within a timely manner that we, will specify in the data request, then we'd probably be taking additional measures to reach out and try to get that response.
Okay, so you're saying more like the generator data modeling process versus the telemetry or forced outage reporting process is what you're saying, is what I'm hearing you say.
Right. Yeah, I think based on, I guess if you're talking about like formal through the ROC process versus it being more of a data outreach, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
And Tiffany, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Yeah, I think that was still the same hand. Yeah, in this version of WebEx, everything stays up unless all the hands kind of get cleared together. Okay. So here's our schedule going forward. So this is the June 25th meeting, and then we have the July 9th comments due in 2 weeks, and then the proposed revision request for the BPM will be in this 3-month timeframe between July and September. So for your comments, you submit those to this email listed here by end of day July 9th. And if you have any other questions, you can send them to ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and we will get those answered for you. And then we've been adding these slides here just to help you stay engaged in everything going on here at the ISO. So here is our stakeholder meetings and comment deadlines for this week, and then also trainings as well. And then we had posted a new Energy Matters blog on the 19th about the important issue of congestion revenue allocation across the EDAM footprint. And the ISO board and WEM governing body jointly approved the new transitional method for allocating congestion revenues in EDAM after it launches next spring. So you can read about that here, and you can also subscribe to the Energy Matters blog below. On behalf of the ISO Stakeholder Affairs, I want to thank Isabella and Kelsey for presenting today. And I'd like to thank Ahmed, our event producer, for their support. And thank you to everybody with questions, and thank you for your participation. We will have this video posted after probably about 3 business days, and that will go onto the calendar event for today. That's where you can find that, and on the miscellaneous page as well. So thank you for joining us today. Ahmed, you may conclude the call.
This event has concluded. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.